All right, get ready because today we're going deep into the world of pharmaceuticals.
We're going to be specifically looking at the regulations that govern how your medications are made.
The current good manufacturing practices, or cGMPs as they're often called.
Yeah, cGMPs.
You've sent us a ton of sources for this one.
Looks like you're really looking for a comprehensive view.
Yeah, excerpts from the Code of Federal Regulations, chapters from books on cell therapy and pharmaceutical labs.
Even some transcripts from GMP training videos, so
By the end of this deep dive,
you'll be able to define cGMPs
understand their historical roots, the logic behind them.
and how they impact the quality and safety of the medicines you use every day.
So let's start with the basics,
cGMPs are essentially a set of regulations,
enforced by the FDA.
the foundation of the pharmaceutical industry,
Making sure that all those pills, injections, and treatments,
are produced and controlled.
according to some pretty strict quality standards.
Really strict.
And this covers everything.
From the manufacturing processes and facilities.
To the training of personnel and all the record keeping involved.
That's a lot.
Think of cGMPs as a detailed recipe for baking a cake.
You know, to get that perfect texture and flavor consistently.
You need to follow the recipe precisely.
And cGMPs are kind of like the recipe for making medicines that are both safe and effective.
To make sure that every batch is meeting those same high standards.
Correct.
Makes sense. But these regulations...
They didn't just appear out of thin air, right?
There's got to be a story behind their development.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
how did they come about?
The origins of cGMPs are really rooted in this idea of patient safety.
A commitment that unfortunately came about from some pretty tough lessons learned.
Yeah, tough lessons.
And one of those lessons, a significant catalyst, I should say,
Was the thalidomide tragedy?
back in the 1960s,
It really showed us what can happen when drug safety is not the priority.
when drug safety is compromised.
Exact.
And thalidomide, just to remind everyone,
was prescribed to pregnant women,
for morning sickness.
but tragically led to
Thousands of babies born with...
really severe birth defects.
It's just a heart-wrenching example.
Of why these regulations are so important.
Emphasizing that need for rigorous testing and stringent quality control measures.
Absolutely.
And it's just crazy to think that that wasn't always the case.
You know, but the thalidomide disaster really did serve as a wake-up call.
It was a huge turning point in the regulatory landscape,
Definitely a turning point.
leading to the Kefauver-Harris Amendment in 1962.
A huge piece of legislation.
That just demanded
A much higher level of scrutiny.
for drug development and manufacturing.
Huge change.
And before that, it was kind of like,
Hoping for the best.
yeah, just hoping for the best. And after this amendment, it really shifted that focus toward proving,
Not only a drug's effectiveness.
but also its safety,
That's right.
and really marking a turning point in
Prioritizing patient well-being.
patient safety.
Absolutely.
So that's how we got cGMPs as we know them today.
Yeah, this was the start of that framework designed to minimize risks and just ensure the quality of your medication.
And that's a great segue because it sounds like these cGMPs, they cover
So much ground.
an incredible amount of ground.
Yeah, am I really?
They address basically every stage of the pharmaceutical production process,
Every stage.
from those raw materials all the way to that finished product.
The product that ends up on the pharmacy shelf.
Yeah, that's right.
They're involved every step of the way.
I found this chapter in a book about cell therapy manufacturing really interesting.
Oh yeah, cell therapy, it's definitely at the forefront of medical innovation.
It seems like it is.
And it's an area where cGMPs are absolutely essential.
I mean, we're talking about manufacturing living cells as medicine here.
Living cells, yeah.
That must be so delicate compared to just producing, a standard tablet or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's a whole different ballgame.
So can you talk a little bit about,
cGMPs and cell therapy.
how those two sort of interact?
Well, this book that you mentioned,
Describes this facility. It's a state-of-the-art cell therapy manufacturing facility.
yeah, they really went all out with this one.
They designed it with cGMP principles in mind right from the get-go.
From the ground up, yeah.
Yeah. So they're not trying to fit cGMPs into an existing setup.
No, they're baking it into the facility's design.
So what are some of the key elements?
Well, they talk about the importance of a controlled environment,
Like really controlled.
with HEPA filters and positive pressure environments.
It's more than just a typical clean room.
It's really next level.
And then they talk about the gowning process.
Oh, yeah, they have this multi-layered gowning process.
For anyone entering those manufacturing areas.
Depending on the sensitivity of the work being done.
So it's almost like suiting up for a spacewalk.
That's a great way to put it.
They're really taking every precaution.
To prevent any kind of contamination.
And it makes sense.
When you're dealing with living cells.
Yeah. You can't be too careful.
You really can't.
And then on top of all that, there's this huge emphasis on documentation,
Documentation is key
like meticulous documentation.
throughout the entire manufacturing process.
So no more scribbling notes on napkins, huh?
Definitely not. It's about creating a clear, auditable record,
Of every single step.
every single one.
And this ensures
Traceability and accountability.
allowing manufacturers to
Track every ingredient in action.
back to its source,
And it just adds another layer of quality control.
so everything is transparent.
Transparency is key.
And we can really trace everything back to where it came from.
Exactly.
So you mentioned a GMP training video,
Yeah, this one really stood out.
and it emphasized,
The importance of real-time documentation.
what does that mean exactly?
They were saying that records should be completed as the work is being done.
So no procrastinating on the paperwork?
Not at all. It's about capturing the information
Right, when it's fresh.
when it's happening,
And that's to prevent errors and omissions.
which could happen if documentation is delayed.
Right, because if you wait too long,
You might forget important details.
and that could compromise,
the accuracy of the records.
and ultimately, the quality of the medicines.
Exactly.
It seems like cGMPs really leave no room for procrastination.
We really don't. It's all about being
Proactive.
meticulous
And really making sure.
that those medications are safe and high quality.
So all this talk of documentation in controlled environments,
It makes you wonder.
how do we know companies are actually sticking to these cGMP guidelines?
It's a good question.
It's not just a theoretical set of rules, right?
Right. There are people making sure these companies are following the guidelines.
Boots on the ground, so to speak,
Exactly. The FDA has a team of highly trained inspectors,
who regularly visit.
pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities.
So they're not just popping in unannounced,
Well, there are unannounced inspections
but they're often scheduled.
to give companies time to prepare.
But it's not a casual visit, right?
No, these inspections are very thorough and rigorous.
What do they involve?
They involve a deep dive into documentation.
So they're checking all the paperwork.
Yep, and they're observing processes.
They're actually watching how things are done.
Right, and they interview personnel.
So they're talking to the people involved.
Absolutely.
They're really getting a 360-degree view
Of the operation.
and making sure
Everything is cGMP compliant.
it's like they're detectives
They really are.
looking for any clues.
Something might be amiss.
And they're guided by
Specific checkpoints and best practices.
to ensure consistency across the industry.
That's right.
So it's not just up to each individual inspector
There's a framework in place.
to ensure a standardized approach.
Exactly.
It sounds like they're really leaving no stone unturned.
They're very thorough.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the what of cGMPs,
The rules, the procedures.
the inspections,
It's a lot to take in.
but let's shift gears and delve into the why.
The why behind it all.
Why are these regulations so crucial?
For the medications themselves.
Like, what impact do they have?
On the actual drugs we take.
It all boils down to
Ensuring the quality
safety
and the efficacy.
of every single pharmaceutical product.
Those three elements are key.
Quality, safety, and efficacy.
They're the foundation of trust.
In the medications we rely on,
Absolutely.
and without cGMPs.
Maintaining that trust would be incredibly difficult.
So cGMPs might sound dry and technical at first,
They can be a little bit dense.
but they actually represent something incredibly important.
They really do.
They're protecting our health and well-being.
That's the bottom line.
It's easy to take our medications for granted,
Yeah, we just assume they'll work.
but it's good to know
That there's a system in place.
to guarantee their quality and safety.
And that system is cGMPs.
The unsung heroes
Working behind the scenes.
to make sure our medications are made to the highest standards.
That's what it's all about.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today.
But we've only just scratched the surface.
There's still so much more to explore.
so much more.
So in our next segment,
We're going to dive into
how cGMPs are applied in practice,
We'll look at some specific examples
of how these regulations impact.
the actual production process.
So stay tuned.
Because things are about to get even more interesting.
It's about to get real.
That's right. You know, it's interesting how these principles of good manufacturing practices, they're not just limited to the U.S.
Oh, really? So other countries have their own versions of cGMPs.
Yeah, they do. The World Health Organization, the WHO, has actually developed these international guidelines
Yeah.
for good manufacturing practices.
Make a sense?
And they serve as a kind of benchmark for
Sure.
countries all around the globe.
Right. Because you want to make sure that a medication produced in, say, France is going to meet a certain standard.
Exactly. It's all about harmonizing standards
Oh, wait.
on a global scale to safeguard patient health no matter where they are.
Right. You don't want it to be like, well, it was made in this country, so.
Exactly. And this global perspective is becoming more and more important these days.
Yeah.
You know, with international trade and these complex supply chains
Right.
for pharmaceutical ingredients and products.
It is a global world when it comes to healthcare.
Absolutely, it really is.
So we've talked a lot about the what and the why of cGMPs, but I'm curious about the how.
The how.
How do these regulations actually play out in a real-world manufacturing setting?
That's where things get really interesting. One of the sources you sent is
Right.
a book about cell therapy manufacturing, and it gives us a glimpse into how cGMP principles are actually applied
Oh, cool.
in the design and operation of a real cutting-edge facility.
Cell therapy. That sounds so advanced.
It is. It's manufacturing living cells as medicines.
I know. It's wild.
Yeah, it's a rapidly evolving field with huge potential, but
That'd be complicated.
it is. It comes with a whole new level of complexity when it comes to manufacturing.
I can imagine.
I mean, you're dealing with living cells.
Right. It's not like
Yeah.
mixing up a powder to make a tablet or something.
It's so much more delicate.
Yeah.
And that's where cGMPs are even more critical.
I bet.
In cell therapy manufacturing, this book describes a facility
Right.
that was literally designed from the ground up
Wow.
with cGMP principles in mind.
So they're not just trying to retrofit cGMPs into an old setup.
Nope, it's baked into the very design.
That's impressive.
It is, and the book talks about all these specific design elements
Cool. Like what?
that are so important for maintaining a controlled and sterile environment,
Okay.
like way beyond what you'd find in a typical pharmaceutical manufacturing setting.
So we're talking HEPA filters, right?
HEPA filters are essential, yeah, but it goes way beyond that.
Okay.
They describe this multi-layered gowning process
Wow.
for anyone entering those manufacturing areas.
Okay.
And the level of gowning depends on how sensitive the work is.
So the more sensitive the process, the more layers of protection.
Yeah, exactly. Like suiting up for a spacewalk.
I love that analogy.
It really illustrates the level of care they're taking
Right.
to prevent any contamination.
They really don't want anything getting in there.
Absolutely not.
Wow. So it's not just what people are wearing.
No.
The facility itself has to be designed in a certain way.
It does. It has to maintain this positive pressure environment
Okay.
throughout the facility.
What does that mean?
So air is constantly flowing outward
Okay.
from the cleanest areas, preventing contaminants from getting in.
So it's like an invisible shield.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Protecting those sensitive cells.
And they do that through
A system of airlocks, HEPA filters, and air pressure differences.
between rooms.
Yeah, between different rooms.
They really thought of everything.
They did. The book even outlines a specific sequence for how people move between areas.
To minimize contamination.
Yeah, to minimize cross-contamination.
It's incredible how much thought goes into all of this.
It is, and it really shows how important cGMPs are
For sure.
for ensuring the quality and safety of these new therapies.
Absolutely. And it's not just fancy facilities and high-tech equipment, right?
Right.
There's got to be a focus on procedures and documentation as well.
Yeah, cGMPs are all about having well-defined procedures for every task, no matter how small.
Okay.
And those procedures have to be documented meticulously,
I see.
so there's no room for ambiguity.
So no relying on memory or doing things differently each time.
Nope, it's about standardization
Got it.
and creating a clear record of what was done.
For consistency and repeatability.
Exactly, so you get the same high-quality product every single time.
That makes sense. You mentioned a training video for pharmaceutical professionals.
Oh, yeah, those are great because they show how these principles are applied in the real world.
Yeah.
And this particular video, it really stresses that documentation isn't just about recording what you did.
Okay.
It's about providing evidence
I've been in that.
that it was done correctly
Okay.
and according to the approved procedures.
So it's not just scribbling some notes.
No, it's about creating a record that can be audited.
It has to stand up to scrutiny.
Exactly. They even talked about specific requirements for handwritten entries,
Like what?
using indelible ink and avoiding correction fluid.
Wow. I never realized there were so many rules for handwriting.
There are. It's all about traceability and accountability.
Makes sense.
If there's ever a question about a batch of medication, you need to be able to trace it back.
To its source.
And that's only possible with good documentation.
It's like a detective's case file
That's a great way to put it.
for each batch of medicine.
It really is.
Lot numbers are like fingerprints.
They are. They allow manufacturers to track every ingredient and every step
Back to the beginning.
back to the origin. That's right.
So those lot numbers on my medication bottles,
They're more than just random numbers.
They're actually really important.
They are. They're essential for maintaining the integrity of the whole supply chain.
So we know we're getting safe and effective medication.
Exactly.
Okay, what else did that training video talk about?
Oh, they emphasize the importance of real-time documentation.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It means completing records as the work is being done.
So no waiting till the end of the day to fill out paperwork.
Nope, capture it right when it's happening.
So you don't forget anything.
Exactly. It ensures accuracy and prevents mistakes.
Okay.
That can happen if you wait too long.
Right, it's fresh in your mind.
It is. It's a real-time snapshot of what's going on.
So cGMPs are really about promoting a culture of diligence.
Yeah, a culture of attention to detail.
No cutting corners.
Definitely not.
Everything has to be done by the book.
That's right.
And speaking of the book, the Code of Federal Regulations, it's got all these details about the manufacturing environment.
Oh, yeah. The Code of Federal Regulations, it's a treasure trove of information.
It covers everything,
Everything.
from building design
to ventilation.
pest control, sanitation.
They've really thought of everything.
There's a section about lighting, right?
There is. It says facilities need adequate lighting.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. You don't want someone inspecting medication in a dim room.
You really don't. They could miss something important.
Exactly.
Adequate lighting is essential for doing things right and spotting problems.
Like contamination.
Yeah, contamination or damage to equipment.
Right.
It seems simple, but it's really important for quality control.
It's all about those details.
It really is. The devil is in the details, as they say.
And then there's a section about ventilation too, right?
Yes, they talk about preventing odors and vapors from contaminating things.
Okay.
Proper ventilation is key for removing dust, fumes, and other stuff from the air.
Yeah, because that could affect the medication,
It could. And ventilation also helps control temperature and humidity.
which is important for some medications.
It's critical for some, yeah.
So it's more than just making the air smell nice
It is. It's about creating that controlled environment.
to protect the products.
Exactly. And then there are regulations about handling materials and equipment, too. So everything used for raw materials, work in progress, and finished products
Okay.
has to be designed and handled in a way that prevents contamination.
So no accidentally mixing ingredients or contaminating a batch of medication.
Nope. And everything needs to be clearly labeled.
With a lot number.
Yes, with a unique lot number.
To keep track of everything.
Traceability, exactly.
It's amazing how all these little details contribute to that bigger picture of quality control.
It really is. It's a system.
What else is in those regulations?
There's a big emphasis on preventing cross-contamination.
Okay, cross-contamination, what's that?
Well, they give a specific example of handling penicillin.
Oh, penicillin, that's serious.
It is, because some people have severe allergies.
Right.
They have to prevent penicillin from contaminating other drugs.
That makes sense.
Because even a tiny bit of penicillin can cause serious problems.
Yeah, even trace amounts.
Right, so if there's any chance of cross-contamination, the other drug,
The non-penicillin drug.
yeah, it has to be tested for penicillin before it can be released.
That's good to know.
It really shows how seriously they take contamination
Yeah.
and patient safety.
So cGMPs aren't just about following a checklist.
No, they're about understanding the science behind it all
Okay.
and using that knowledge to minimize risks and protect patients.
So it's a blend of science and a commitment to patient safety.
That's it, exactly.
It sounds like they really have thought of everything.
They've tried to.
But with all these regulations and procedures, who's actually making sure it all happens?
That's a great question. It's easy to get lost in the rules, but it's the people who make it all work.
So it's not just robots and machines.
No, there's a big human element to cGMP compliance.
Okay, so who are these people?
Well, cGMPs emphasize the role of qualified and trained personnel.
Makes sense.
In fact, the regulations say that each critical step in the manufacturing process, it has to be performed by at least 2 qualified people.
2 people for each step.
Yeah, it might seem like overkill, but it's a safeguard.
To prevent errors.
Right, and to ensure accountability.
So one person does the task,
Yeah,
and another person checks to make sure it was done right.
that's it. It's a system of checks and balances.
I see.
To minimize human error.
And this applies to everything.
Pretty much, yeah. From reviewing documents to approving processes.
So it takes a whole team to make sure everything's up to snuff.
It does, and that's one of the key takeaways from all these sources.
Okay.
cGMPs aren't just about compliance. They're about building a culture of quality.
A culture of quality.
Yeah, that permeates the whole organization.
That's a good way to put it.
It's not just about following rules. It's about caring about quality.
And taking ownership.
Exactly.
And I like that.
It's inspiring, to see how these regulations empower people
Yeah.
to take ownership of quality and make the pharmaceutical industry safer. It's a
Absolutely.
team effort.
So we've talked a lot about the details, but what about the bigger picture?
The big picture.
With all the innovation happening in the pharmaceutical industry,
Yeah, new technologies, new therapies.
do you think cGMPs can keep up?
That's a great question. The industry is constantly evolving, and cGMPs have to evolve with it.
So it's not just a static set of rules
Nope, they have to be flexible and forward-thinking.
to stay relevant.
Exactly.
What are some of the areas where you see cGMPs needing to adapt?
Well, one area is personalized medicine.
Oh, personalized medicine. That's where treatments are tailored to individual patients.
That's right, based on their genetic makeup and other factors.
Yeah.
It's got huge potential, but it's also a big challenge for manufacturing.
I can see that, making a custom medication for each person.
It's not like mass production.
It's a whole different ballgame.
It is, and cGMPs will need to change to address those challenges.
Like what kind of changes?
Well, traditional batch manufacturing methods might not be suitable anymore.
Right, because it's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
So maybe more flexible manufacturing processes.
Yeah, more flexible and adaptable.
Maybe even moving away from the traditional approach to drug development.
That could happen, and I think we'll see a greater reliance on automation,
Okay.
real-time monitoring, and data analytics
To ensure quality control.
in this new individualized manufacturing environment.
So the future of cGMPs is all about embracing new technology
It is, and finding new ways to apply these principles.
to keep pace with all the changes.
Right, to keep pace with innovation.
That makes sense.
But even with all the technology, we can't forget the human element.
The human element.
It's still about having qualified and dedicated people
Okay.
who understand cGMPs and are committed to upholding the highest standards.
Right, because at the end of the day, it's about people.
It is. It's about people's health and well-being.
So even in a highly regulated and technical industry,
The human element is still key.
it's what drives quality and innovation.
Absolutely. And as the pharmaceutical industry keeps evolving,
Yeah.
it's going to be more important than ever
Right?
to have a strong foundation in cGMP principles.
To make sure new therapies and technologies,
Are developed and manufactured responsibly and ethically.
right, with patient well-being at the forefront.
Always. That's the ultimate goal.
Well said. Now, we've talked about the evolution and the future of cGMPs, but there's another important piece of the puzzle.
What's that?
Equipment qualification.
Oh, yes. Equipment qualification.
That's a cornerstone of cGMP compliance.
It is. It's about making sure every piece of equipment used in manufacturing
Mhm.
is fit for its intended purpose and operates reliably.
Okay, that makes sense, but can you break that down for me?
Sure. Equipment qualification is basically a process
Okay.
to demonstrate that a piece of equipment
Uh-huh.
is suitable for what it's supposed to do
Okay.
and consistently operates within the right parameters.
So you're proving it's reliable and does what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. Think of it like an oven.
An oven.
Before you trust an oven to bake a cake perfectly,
Yeah.
you want to make sure it heats evenly,
Right.
reaches the right temperature,
Okay.
and maintains that temperature.
You don't want a half-baked cake.
Exactly. So equipment qualification is like making sure every piece of equipment in a pharmaceutical facility.
Is as reliable as a good oven.
That's a great way to put it. And it goes beyond just the equipment itself.
Okay.
Qualification also looks at the installation of the equipment,
I see.
the utilities it uses, even the processes it's involved in.
It's a holistic approach.
It is. It's about making sure every aspect meets cGMP standards.
So you can't cut corners or just assume it'll work.
Nope. You have to prove it.
Got it. One of the sources you sent, a book about GMP auditing, talks about how auditors assess equipment qualification.
Auditors play a big role in making sure everyone's following the rules.
Yeah.
They're like detectives, carefully examining everything to verify it's been done right.
So what are they looking for when they're assessing equipment qualification?
They start by making sure the equipment is right for the job.
Okay.
For example, if a piece of equipment is for sterile filtration,
Uh-huh.
they'll make sure it meets the requirements for sterile filtration.
Right, so it's fit for purpose.
Exactly. They also check if it's been installed correctly
Okay.
and that all the utilities, like electricity and water, are working.
So they really do look at the whole setup.
They do. And then they'll review calibration records.
Calibration records.
Yeah, to make sure the equipment is measuring and controlling things accurately.
Right, so that's about making sure the measurements are reliable.
That's it. They want to see proof that the equipment has been calibrated against certified standards
Okay.
and that those calibrations are done regularly.
So if there are any problem,
Deviations from the standards,
Yeah.
they'll want to know why and what was done to fix it.
they really are like detectives.
They are.
looking for any inconsistencies.
Exactly. And they'll also look for evidence of proper maintenance.
So you can't just set it up and forget about it.
Nope, you have to keep it in good working order.
Regular cleaning, servicing, repairs.
All of that, they'll check maintenance logs and records to make sure.
So it's all about being proactive
It is.
and preventing issues before they arise.
That's right. Maintaining that equipment is key.
It's incredible how much goes into making sure every piece of equipment is running smoothly.
It is. It really highlights the importance of a good quality control system.
No room for chance.
Definitely not.
And it's not just about meeting regulations, right?
Right. It's about building a culture of quality.
Where everyone understands their role.
Exactly. Everyone understands that their actions affect the safety and effectiveness of the medications.
So even the smallest details can have big consequences.
Absolutely.
That's a powerful reminder.
It is. Every piece of equipment, every procedure, every record, it all matters.
It all contributes to the bigger picture
of patient safety.
So when we talk about cGMPs, it's more than just rules in a book.
Way more. It's a philosophy.
A philosophy of quality, safety, and efficacy.
Yeah. A system where every detail matters.
And as we've seen from all these sources,
yeah,
that system involves so much attention to detail, documentation, continuous improvement.
And that commitment to putting patients first.
Always.
Absolutely.
So we've seen how cGMPs touch every single part of pharmaceutical manufacturing.
From the facilities and the equipment.
To the people and all the systems in place.
And it's really that attention to detail that gives you confidence that your medications
are made to those high standards.
Consistently, yeah.
You know, going through all these sources, it's clear that cGMPs aren't just a set of rules.
They're more than that.
It's really a whole philosophy.
Yeah, a philosophy that puts quality and patient safety first.
And integrates that into the entire industry.
That's a good way to put it.
And one thing we keep coming back to is this idea of qualification.
Qualification.
Especially when we talk about equipment.
Equipment qualification. That's so important.
I know it is, but to be honest with you, I don't really know what that means.
You don't know what it entails.
No, can you break it down for me?
Sure. So it's basically demonstrating that a piece of equipment is fit for its purpose and that it consistently operates within those predetermined parameters.
So you're proving that it's reliable and does what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. Think of it like this.
Okay.
You have an oven, right?
I do.
Before you trust that oven to bake a cake perfectly, you want to make sure it heats evenly, right?
Right.
Reaches the correct temperature and maintains that temperature.
Of course, you don't want a half-baked cake.
No one wants a half-baked cake. So equipment qualification is like making sure every piece of equipment
in a pharmaceutical facility
is as reliable as a well-calibrated oven.
That's a good analogy.
It is, and it's more than just the equipment itself.
Okay, what else is there?
Well, qualification also involves looking at the installation of the equipment.
Okay, how it's set up.
Right, the utilities it uses, and even the processes it's involved in.
So it's a whole system.
It is. It's about making sure that every aspect of that equipment's operation meets the cGMP standards.
So there's no cutting corners.
Nope, you have to prove it.
And speaking of proving things, one of the sources we have is a book about GMP auditing.
Oh, yeah, auditing.
And it talks about how auditors actually assess this equipment qualification during inspections.
Yeah, those auditors, they really dive deep.
I know they do. So what are they looking for when they're examining equipment qualification?
Well, first off, they want to make sure the equipment is actually appropriate for the intended use.
Okay, like it's designed for the right job.
Right. So, for example, if a piece of equipment is meant for sterile filtration, they'll make sure it meets the requirements for sterile filtration processes.
So it's fit for purpose.
Exactly. And they'll check to see if it's been installed correctly,
okay,
making sure all the utilities are connected and working properly.
So they're looking at the whole picture.
The whole setup, yeah.
And what about the actual performance of the equipment?
Well, they'll review calibration records.
Calibration records, those are important.
They are. It's all about making sure the equipment is measuring and controlling things accurately.
Right, because those readings and measurements have to be reliable.
They do. They'll look for proof that it's been calibrated against certified standards.
Okay.
And that those calibrations are done regularly.
So if there are any discrepancies, they'll want to know why.
Exactly, and they'll want to know what was done to fix the problem.
Like any good detective?
They are detectives.
And then they'll look at equipment maintenance as well, right?
Yes, they'll check the maintenance logs and records.
To make sure everything's being kept up.
Yeah, so regular cleaning, servicing, repairs.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
No, you got to stay on top of it.
It's an ongoing process.
It is. It's all about preventing problems before they happen.
And ensuring that the equipment keeps running smoothly.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
It is, and it's amazing how much goes into making sure all that happens.
It is, but it's necessary.
Yeah, it really shows the commitment to quality that the whole industry has.
It really does.
There's no room for error.
Not when it comes to people's health.
And that's the heart of it all, right?
It is.
It's not just about following the rules
No, it's about understanding why those rules are there.
and having that commitment to quality.
That's what makes the difference.
That's what ensures that those medications are safe and effective.
Exactly.
So when we talk about cGMPs, it really is more than just a set of rules.
It's a whole philosophy.
A philosophy that puts quality and patient safety first.
And that's what gives you confidence in those medications you rely on.
Exactly, because you know that behind every pill or injection,
There's this whole system in place.
designed to protect your health.
That's what cGMPs are all about.
And that's what we've been exploring in this deep dive.
It's been a journey.
It has, and I think we've all learned a lot
I hope so.
about the importance of these regulations.
They might seem technical and complicated,
They are.
but they're there for a reason.
And that reason is to protect us.
To make sure those medications we take are safe and effective.
And that's what matters most.
Absolutely.
So the next time you pick up your medication,
Remember those cGMPs.
remember all the people and processes behind the scenes.
Working to ensure your health and well-being.
That's right. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cGMPs.
It's been a pleasure.